Good morning, all. I deemed it a great honor and privilege to welcome you for alumni guest lecture, Clinical Research in Nursing. Let me first of all start by giving glory to the Almighty God for making today's occasion a resounding success. We first thank our management for creating this wonderful platform where we are able to form a forum to share our thoughts. We are grateful to our principal, Dr. Jayasudha A, who is really a guiding and constant motivating force behind our endeavor. I am delighted to welcome you for alumni guest lecture, Clinical Research in Nursing. It gives me an immense pleasure to introduce the today's speaker, Mrs. Josie Terencia Paul Prabhu, Senior Clinical Nurse, Manchester Royal Infirmary, Manchester, UK. She holds a BS Nursing with a Best Outgoing Graduate and Best Clinical Nurse Award, PhD College of Nursing 2004 batch. She has completed course on improving healthcare through clinical research practice with skill training, GCP, face-to-face in University of Leeds, NIHR. She has also completed an Edward Jenner Leadership Program in NHS Leadership Academy and MBA in Hospital Administration, Alagappa University. She worked as nurse acute medicine, Manchester Royal Infirmary, UK, and she worked as nursing tutor and staff nurse in India. She was awarded and appreciated for increasing research portfolio by Research and Innovations, Manchester Royal Infirmary during Nurses Day 2019. She was awarded the best poem on Be a Part of Research, Be a Part of Change during Year of Nurse and Midwife 2020. Research and Innovations, Manchester Royal Infirmary. She has plenty of international publications. I wish you a productive and enjoyable guest lecture. Now I welcome Mrs. Josie Terencia Paul Prabhu to start the sessions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this wonderful introduction.
Thank you.
It's been my honor to be a part of this presentation. I would like to extend my thanks to Principal Jayasudha ma'am. Special mentions to you, Professor Bhaskaran sir, because you've been coordinating with me since I've been approached. Thank you very much. And I know all of you people are having a busy day listening to a lot of lectures. I will try my level best to make it more interesting. One thing I want to specially mention was I watched a World Arthritis Awareness campaign hosted by the PSGCon students in the YouTube. Well done. It was amazing, and you people are very creative. I'm very proud of my future young generation of PSGNs. I know it's tough time in India now with COVID around and the global pandemic around. On behalf of all the alumni of PSGCon, I extend my strengths and prayer to all you people. Stay safe. So let me start my presentation. I would like to be more interactive, please, because I know it's very hard to sit in a Zoom session. Please make it as interactive as possible by responding to my queries. The presentation is Clinical Research in Nursing. As you see, my name is Joshi and I am research. You can see this is one of my the picture which was taken during my research awareness campaign in my trust. You might think why I'm saying I'm research. I hope at the end of the presentation, all of you people would say you are research as well. So let me start off with the first question in my presentation. Have you ever heard of C21? Please, you can unmute yourself and answer my questions, or you can just reply to me in the chat box. Any responses, please? Have you ever heard of C21? Can I have some responses?
Students, you can unmute பண்ணிட்டு கேட்டுக்கலாம். You can answer. Students,
please answer. All right. Okay, C21. At the end of the presentation,
Center Research 21.
Sorry, say it again, please.
Center Research 21.
Great.
The theme for 2020.
Okay, that's nice guess. Is it Gokula Krishnan? Great, wonderful.
Yes.
All right, but the answer which I have is a bit different. You have to wait till the end of the presentation to know what C21 stands for. And at the end of my presentation, I'm going to offer you all a trial dose of C21. So be ready. Don't go anywhere throughout my presentation. I'll be offering seat 21 at any time. And the next question is, what is your nursing career aspiration or goal? Which means at the end of your nursing degrees, what do you want to become? Do you want to work as a clinical research nurse or a nurse in a hospital, or you want to be a tutor? Please, anyone, unmute yourself and answer or reply to me in your chat box, please. What is your nursing career aspiration or goal? Gokula Krishnan, do you want to answer me, please?
Ma'am, I thought of completing management in hospital administration.
Well done, well done. All the best for your career. Anyone
Yes.
else? Ilamadi, do you want to answer? Okay, so Gokula Krishna had said that he wanted to finish his master's in hospital management. I wish him good luck. So whatever be your nursing career aspiration, be it be a clinical research nurse, be it be a manager, a hospital side bedside nurse, or a professor, research will be everyone's business. Everyone's future is research. So clinical research is everyone's future. At the end of this presentation, you'll be learning about what is clinical research, the various types of research studies, how research can be inculcated in nursing, and the ethics or moral values which have to be followed during the research, and bridging the gap between clinical practice and research. So, again, this is one more question. When you go to hospitals, have you ever thought which medication is better? Is it paracetamol or ibuprofen? Have you ever thought why there are different types of pain medication? You know, same patients, for example, a diabetes patient, in a diabetes ward, there are people are diagnosed with the same disease condition. Everyone are diagnosed with diabetes. But why does each one have different medications prescribed? Why is their prescription chart different for each one? When one is having metformin, why is another one being prescribed with insulin? You would have witnessed the patient information leaflet like this in the patients when you administer medications. Where does the information about the possible side effects come? Where do people get the information like paracetamol when it's taken overdose will affect your liver? How does this information come? Within 1 year of global pandemic, how are we able to formulate different types of COVID-19 vaccine? Where does all this knowledge and conclusions come from? How do we know that remdesivir and dexamethasone is effective with COVID-19, whereas hydroxychloroquine, which is a medication used to treat malaria, is not effective in treating COVID-19? Where does all this information come from? The answer to all these questions come from evidences and conclusions based on clinical research, which is the topic for today. So as clinical research nurses, you have to be very, very innovative, and you have to be asking questions. Have you ever seen children, especially toddlers? They ask you a lot of questions like, how does that happen? When does that happen? Why does that happen? That's what a nurse should think to be a part of clinical research. This is the definition of clinical research. To make it simple, I'm not going to go through any of these definitions. I'll make it in a simple manner to make you people understand. So clinical research, or the research studies which is happening with human beings as the subjects. We call the human participants, the patients who are participating in clinical research are called as participants in clinical research. Is clinical research essential? Yes. This is the only evidence-based method of deciding whether a new approach to treatment of care is better than the current standard. Imagine if there is no clinical research, we will still be remaining in the old age, in the old school of thoughts in medications. The medicines would not have been advanced at all. Like there will be a past. If there is no clinical research, we will be just using the medications or devices which you're using just now throughout your life. Right from the blood pressure machine to the pacemaker, right from a paracetamol to the advanced medications used in critical care, everything comes only through research. So research is important to prevent, cure disease, and also to diagnose them. All right, one more question. I'm going to talk about the history of nursing research. you can wonder why you want to know about the history of nursing research. I believe most of you people speak Tamil. There is a Tamil a film dialogue which says "Varalaru mukkiyam amaichare." So which means history is very important, and I would like to go back to the pages where we look into the historical context of nursing research. Any guess of who would be the first nursing researcher? Please unmute yourself and answer me, please. Sabina Selvaraj, do you want to answer me, please? Ilamadi, Nandakumar, anyone, please? Or Gokula Krishnan back again? Who do you think as the pioneer of nursing research? Any guess?
Florence Nightingale.
Well done. Who is that?
Ma'am,
Shalini. Well done, Shalini. Well done. Yes, Florence Nightingale is the first clinical researcher. So Florence Nightingale in 1850s during the Crimean War, as you all know, she was caring for the soldiers during the Crimean War. At that time, she collected data from all these people who are hospitalized. He collected data and tried to find out problems, and also she analyzed the data to find solution for those problems. This is the diagram of Florence Nightingale. So here the blue color indicates the deaths of the soldiers which is due to preventable causes. The preventable cause of death, she shaded it in blue color. The death which happened due to the battlefield wounds, she shaded it in red color, and the black color indicates the death which are caused from any other causes. So you can see the comparison between two diagrams. This is the chart she drew from 1854 to 1855, and this is the chart she drew in the next year. So she had made some interventions. She formulated some strategies to prevent deaths, and you can see the blue diagram. If you see the blue color, there is a massive reduction from 1855 March to 1856 March. You can see this is the first diagram is 1856 diagram, and this is the 1855 diagram. You can see there is a reduction, massive reduction in the blue shaded columns, which means she wanted to prove to the medical society that interventions will reduce the morbidity and mortality of the soldiers. So clinical research is broadly classified into two types. Clinical research is a very broad ocean. It's a bigger ocean. I'm just going to give you the overview of what clinical research is today. So as the name suggests, it's divided into two: observational and interventional. So observational is what you observe. The researcher or the investigator, he's not making any actions at all, he's just observing. It's like you go to a ward and you see a patient's being diagnosed with hypertension, so you just collect the data, the blood pressure of the patients when they get admitted and the blood pressure when they get discharged. So you're just collecting the data, you're not giving them any medication, or you're not changing the treatment they're getting. So you just continue with whatever is given and you just observe them. So this is called as observational research. These are few examples of observational research. The first one is you're seeing an association between smoking and lung cancer. For example, you're collecting the data of people in Coimbatore and you see how many people smoke and how many of them get lung cancer. Here, the researcher is very quiet. He's just observing, but he's collecting the data. You're seeing between the risk of mental illness and suicide. So when I was a student in PSG Con during my third year, me and my madam for mental health, the then teacher, Professor Anu ma'am, and my MSc nursing senior Antoniana, who is no more, I would like to give my thanks to them, because they kind of kindled my interest in research. Then when I was in my third year of nursing, we presented a paper on retrospective study on association between mental illness and risk for suicide, which was like, I went to the PSG records department, went through the patient's folder, gathered the people who had mental illness, who was admitted with mental illness, and how many of them had got suicidal ideation. So retrospective is, as you see, retro music is older music. music in 1980s is called as retro music. So you're just going back to the patient's record and seeing how many of them were admitted with mental health, mental illness, and how many of them had suicide risks. So this is just observational study where you're not doing any intervention at all. One more example, which I would say in the light of the global pandemic, is genomic study. This is a study where people who are admitted with COVID-19, they collect the blood samples and they analyze their genes. You have seen that few people recover with COVID-19 very soon, whereas few people get critically ill. So what is causing it? They are just collecting blood samples from the patients and seeing what is the correlation between them, the sickness, the illness in COVID-19 and their genes. So here again, the researcher is not doing any intervention, you're just observing. This is one of the research studies which me and my team published last year in England during COVID-19. So this is a study which was done with type 1 diabetes patients in England. As you all know, with type 1 diabetes, there is no insulin. So people will have hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia. The patients diagnosed with type 1 diabetes are prone to have high blood sugar levels or low blood sugar levels. So they have to prick their fingers each and every time to measure their blood sugar levels. This, as you see, this instrument is called as a glucose sensor. If you see in this diagram, the patient has got a sensor. The white round column is called as the sensor, and this mobile-like device is called as a reader. Using this, the patients don't have to prick their fingers. If they scan the sensor with the reader, the blood sugar level comes here. So what we did is, we collected the data of the patients who were already using the blood glucose sensors in the lockdown. We just collected the data remotely and we saw if the blood sugar levels have been improved, or if there was a deterioration in the blood sugar level, or has it remained the same throughout the lockdown. This is again one of the observational study. Interventional study, as the name suggests, you are intervening. It can be like giving an injection, a medication, or any medical devices as well. Like the previous example you saw, I mentioned you about the glucose sensor. So it can be anything. That is called as interventional studies. The interventional studies are called as clinical trials. Trialing is, you're just trialing with something new. One important key term you all people have to be aware of is placebo in the research field. Placebo is nothing but a dummy medication. It's got no effect. It can be, instead of an injection, you can give a normal saline, or instead of a tablet, you're going to administer just a dummy tablet which has got no effect at all. That is called as a placebo. Placebo effect, it's very important in research to compare a interventional medication or a device with a placebo. So I know I might be sounding like speaking Greek and Roman because it's a lot. Research is very in-depth, but I'm just trying to give you some examples here. Please stay awake and listen to me. You will find the answer for C21 at any time, so please stay awake. So interventional studies. This is an example of an interventional study. As you see, this study is to see that it's a trial to determine how good is Ache-Away, a headache drug. This is just an example, just an imaginary study. So you see here, the researcher is using a medication called Ache-Away. It is a tablet. So he's dividing the patients who is using the medication into two. The one on the blue color is called as control group, and the one on the orange is called as the intervention group. Control group means you are controlling, so you are not going to give any medication. This set of people, color coded in blue, is just going to receive a placebo, which is like a dummy medication. Whereas this set of people who are in the interventional group, they are going to receive the medication. So you give one tablet for all of this group, one tablet every day in the night. So at the end of the trial period, what is concluded that the conclusion was the people who take one placebo tablet each night, they improved by 5%, which means their pain reduced by 5%, whereas there was 85% improvement in the participants who took Ache-Away tablet. So why is a placebo important? As you see, in order to compare an intervention, a medication or a device, you need to know how far is it effective or not. The conclusions can be made only when you have a placebo in hand. So thus the conclusion is made in this study that Acovey is more effective than placebo. Is there any queries, please? Please raise your hand, or if you have any queries, you can stop me in between, or if you want to have any translations in Tamil or Malayalam, I can try. Please, if you have any doubts, please come back to me. So this is an example of an interventional study again, which I was also involved in this. So as I mentioned in the observational study, where I told you about the glucose sensor, if you see into the laser pointing where I'm showing the red light, this is the glucose sensor and this is the reader. So in this study, what we did was, few of our participants were carrying out with the normal blood glucose measuring system, which is finger pricking. So this is the normal method people use, and we intervened. We gave them this device to see how far their blood sugar level is improving. So it is comparing. Here we are giving an intervention. It's not just observing. We gave them this device to see and compared what was their blood sugar level when they used the self-pricking device, and what is their blood sugar level post using a medical device. This is again an example of an interventional study. When the COVID-19 pandemic just turned up, we didn't know what the treatment for COVID-19 was. The only solution for COVID-19 treatment was research. So there were lots of research studies. One such massive study globally is called as a recovery study. In this study, patients were given various treatment options like remdesivir or dexamethasone and few other options. Each patients were allocated to different treatment arms, and they were comparing which one is effective. That's how they concluded that remdesivir and dexamethasone were effective in treating COVID-19. This is a testimony of a patient called Catherine, who was in the clinical trial, and she was diagnosed with COVID-19 last year. She was critically ill, and then she was administered dexamethasone. Listen to her story. It's just a quick story. Listen to her story, please. So here she talks about how she recovered from. So that's the story of Catherine, who recovered from COVID-19 using a dexamethasone. So you can see the impact of research here, where the patient was using a medication and it saved a life. So when you think of all these clinical trial medications or devices, they don't just come into the market, or they don't get licensed very soon. For example, they have to go through different phases of clinical trial. Like if I'm inventing a medication, I can't just come to the pharmaceutical companies and say, come on, please do distribute my medication. It can't be done that way. You have to test and see if that is effective with the patients. So the phases of clinical trial, you got 4 phases. There is one phase earlier to this, which is called as early phase, where the medication, when you invent it or when you formulate it, it's being tried and tested with animal, or with animals like rabbits, or with 1 or 2 participants. Then the medication moves into phase 1, where you test the medication with 20 to 80 patients. It is tested up to several months. The phase 1, you're just basically looking at the safety of the medication. Is it safe to use? Is it causing any serious side effects? The side effects are called as adverse events in the clinical research field. So is it causing any serious adverse events? Is it causing death? Can it be used as a medication? Can it be given to the population? This is tested in the phase 1. In phase 2, you try the medication with up to 300 participants, and you see if the medication is effective. If it is a painkiller, you're seeing is it reducing the pain. The effectiveness of the medication is mainly noted in the phase 2. In phase 3, you look at the safety, efficacy, and also the dose. So what is the maximum dose a medication can be given? For all the medications we use, there is a maximum dose. You can't, you would have
Ma'am,
heard
your
about
video,
drug
it's not
overdose.
visible. Yes, now it's.
Yeah, so you would have heard about drug overuse. So am I visible now, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sir, thank you. So that is the phase 3 of the trial, and the phase 4, you distribute the medication to a lot of population. For example, lots of the COVID vaccine medications are in the phase 4 trial now, where it's being given to thousands and thousands of population, and you're just seeing the long-term effectiveness of the medication. Is there any serious side effects which is affecting? You're just monitoring it for a long time. Usually the phase 4 is done once the medication is licensed. So, and also you look after the cost effectiveness of the medication in the phase 4. I think I'm just very monotonous, and I'm a bit boring. So I'm thinking I want to just wake you up all this morning. You know, this is it's early morning in Manchester now. My boys are sleeping upstairs, so I'm talking a bit. I'm reducing my volume just not to wake them, but I would like to wake you all up. So let's play a guessing game. Are you all ready? Gokula Krishna, where are you? Shalini, are you all ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Well done. So this is a guessing game. I'm going to show you a picture, and you guys will have to find what it is, okay? Your time starts now. Guess the medical procedure using the clue I've given here.
CPR.
CPR. Well done. Well done. Who was that? Who was the one who answered?
Ma'am, Shiva Bharati, ma'am.
Shiva Bharati. Well done, Shiva Bharati. So yes, it's CPR. One more question. Can we have one more time? Can you find the medical device, please? What is this medical
Incubator.
device?
Incubator.
Well done, well done, well done. Can I have the names, please? The ones who answered?
Gokula Krishnan.
Shalini.
Shalini, Gokula Krishnan.
Shiva
Well
Bharati,
done.
ma'am.
Shiva Bharati.
Viveka, ma'am.
Well done, everybody. Well done. Congratulations. You people are amazing and brilliant. And thanks for listening. I can assure that you people are not sleeping with Zoom meeting on. All right. So let us go into the roles of a clinical research nurse. The roles of a clinical research nurse is very wider. It's very wide. People think like research nurses or someone who just sits in the lab and they do nothing. And they just formulate or find out drugs. It's not the case. Research nursing is a frontline
Ma'am, your
service.
video, it's not visible.
Am I visible, sir? Am I visible, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Now it's visible.
Thank you, sir. I think it's because of some technical issues. I'm sorry about that, sir. So research nurses or frontline services, where you work in the front line, you care for patients, and you do the patient care. You administer the medications, you are with them. So it is a frontline service. As a research nurse, you are educating the patients and the public. You're managing your own team. You're also patient's advocate. You want to speak up for the patients. For example, when you think a medication would not be beneficial for this patient, you are advocating for the patients and you're raising up your voices. You're counselors for the patients. For example, when you're working on oncological research studies, especially with cancer patients, you have to counsel not only the patients, to the family as well. Because for oncological research studies, many of the oncological research studies, the research is the only answer for their health. So you have to counsel the family and the patients, and you have to make decisions for the patient. For example, when you're caring for a patient, you're seeing that this patient is having a serious side effect of a medication, you have to make the decision and raise the alarm. You escalate the issue. again, in Western countries, you see research nursing is being established, but in countries like India, we find that research nursing is still in a developing stage. When people think of research, they just think of academics who do their research studies as a part of their master's program or during their undergraduation. But research is not only with your academics, it's clinical as well. As a research nurse, you have to meet the target and deadlines. Like you have a pharmaceutical company will come and tell you have to just, we need 40 patients to test on this medication. So you work on and you meet the target. Data collection is an important aspect of clinical research nursing because, for example, imagine a clinical study which is taken globally. You administer a particular medication and you're seeing that this patient has got headache, and somewhere in Malaysia that they are testing the medication and they find that the other patient has got headache as well. Globally, you see that out of 1,000 patients using the medication, 700 have reported headache. So the possible and the common side effect of that medication would be headache. This is how data comes in. The data, each and every bit, it can be a small vital signs, even a little change in the parameters have to be documented carefully. Liaising is coordinating with different teams. You coordinate with the multidisciplinary team, with a lot of people globally as well. Research nursing is not only within the hospital where you work. You have to talk with people around the world. And as nurses, you prepare documentation. You are innovating. You're finding something new. And of course, nursing is multitasking. So you have to be a multitasker to be a good clinical research nurse. The key clinical skills for a research nurse is autonomy. This is one thing which I'm always proud of, being a research nurse, where you are autonomous. You work on your own. You need to have good clinical skills to transfer that to your patient care. You have to prioritize your load. Paying attention to details. For example, you can see that one patient who came in during your first visit, he was fine. During the second visit, you see that he has lost weight. The third visit, you see that he's very dull. A patient who is on a trial medication. So this is a very little thing, but it makes a big change. Maybe this medication is helping with weight loss, or it's reducing his blood sugar level, so or increasing his blood sugar level. All these little things, paying attention to detail, even in nursing, it's very, very important. Good communication skills, thinking out of the box, computer skills, because now with COVID-19, even when you talk to the patients, computer skills are very important, where you use meetings like Zoom and Microsoft Teams. Continuous learning and resilient. Resilient is coming up back. For example, you would be working on a clinical trial, which at the end of the trial you find that that medication is not effective in preventing a disease. So you can't just sit up like saying, oh my God, this medication didn't work, so I'm leaving nursing. No, you're being resilient. You're coming back and trying with a different medication. Ethics. Ethics in clinical research is very, very important. Ethics is a set of moral values. It's a set of moral values you follow. Even in your day-to-day life, you have your own ethics. You follow your own moral value. In clinical research, it's of paramount importance. It's very vital and significant. Again, come back. This is a question. Have you heard of thalidomide? Any third years and final years? Have you heard of thalidomide drug in midwifery? Any answers? Have you ever heard of thalidomide? Gokula Krishnan, where are you? Shalini? Christy? Selvi? Anyone? Any answer? Alright. Jnana Jyoti? Mani Meghalai? Alright. Guys, where are you? Are you all there? Cancer drug. Well done, Shalini. So cancer drug, it is not a cancer drug, but it can cause teratogenic effect. So Shalini has tried to answer. Thanks, Shalini, for responding. At the end of the session, whoever is very interactive will get special appreciation. So guys, be more interactive, yeah? So thalidomide, this is looking back at a tragedy, something which happened, a thalidomide tragedy in the early 1960s. So thalidomide was found as a drug which was used to treat women especially to promote sleeping. So thalidomide actually came in early 1960s in the Europe, and it was advertised as a drug with no side effects. They said this has got no side effects and it's safe for the pregnant women. So many of this was distributed globally across 43 nations. Many patients were, especially pregnant women, were prescribed with thalidomide. So it was even given as over the counter, which means you don't even need a prescription to get it. So many of these pregnant women, they went to the shops, they got the medication to promote sleeping, because it was told that this will help with sleeping, which is a sedative, and it can also ease your nausea and morning sickness. Shalini, Phocomelia, very good. Shalini has answered me there. So yes, so coming back to the story, this thalidomide was given in 1960s to a lot of people, many women, pregnant women. In pregnancy you have lack of sleep, you suffer with nausea, so they went to the shop, they got the thalidomide and they had it. But when they delivered the baby, when many of these pregnant women, they delivered the baby, the result was shocking. As Shalini has rightly mentioned, the babies born for these pregnant women had phocomelia. So phocomelia is shortness of the limbs. You can see here the picture, the picture of the babies born for these women who were administered with this drug called thalidomide. So it is called as a teratogenic drug. It affects the fetus. Teratogenicity is a drug, it can affect the fetus. So it affected the fetus, and the babies born for those pregnant women administered with this drug had phocomelia. So then the research fraternity, people who are doing research, they woke up and they said patient safety should come as the top priority. Before a drug is being distributed in the market, it has to undergo formal regulations, and it has to be licensed. So the rights, safety and well-being of patients comes above all. So it is like balancing. You weigh the risk and you also weigh the benefits. Is it more riskier to give the medication? For example, if you think of COVID-19 vaccines, what are the risks? After you have a COVID-19 vaccine, you might feel feverish, you might have a achy arm, you might feel nausea, headache for 2 or 3 days or for a week. But what is the benefit? It can prevent you with critical illness due to COVID-19. It can prevent deaths. So that is the benefit. So always you are weighing the risks and benefits, because every medication, everything comes with a negative effect. There is nothing, no medication has got is in the market which you can proudly say that it's got no side effects. Every medication has got a side effects, but you are balancing, your viewing, is the benefits more or is the risk more? If only you can use a drug only when the benefits are more. So the patient safety comes as the topmost priority. The next is informed consent. You would have seen us getting concerned even before a surgery or a hospital admission. We get consent. Consent is getting a signature from a patient, but it has to be voluntary in the clinical research. You can't just go to a patient and say, hey, I'm going to give you this medication, I'm going to force you. No, it has to be voluntary. And it has to be a two-way discussion. You have to give adequate time for the patients to ask questions, and you're going to explain the risks and benefits. And informed consent is ongoing. Like if you're recruiting a patient for a research study in this month, and if the research study is continuing for 5 years, you have to make sure the patient is still happy to continue in the study for 5 years. If they are not happy, they are happy to get withdrawn at any point of time. So informed consent is the key in research. The other golden rule, the rule of the thumb, is documentation. What is not documented is not done. This I can correlate it with your clinical practice as well. For example, you're receiving a call from your consultant and he's advising you to administer a particular medication to your patient. You administer it. You have signed in the nurse's drug chart, but you have not mentioned that this medication was prescribed over the phone by this particular consultant. The next day, the patient gets a side effect and he's seriously ill. So where is the point that they will question you asking, how did you administer this medication? Who asked you to administer this medication? So documentation is very important throughout the walks of nursing research. Make sure, even as student nurses, make sure you document, and research as well, documentation is very, very essential and vital. So you would think, why am I talking about all these clinical research to you people, to students? It is mainly because to bridge the gap. Research without practice is like building castles in the air. It's like just building castles in the air, which just gets destroyed. And clinical practice without clinical research is like building castles on slippery grounds. So research and practice go hand in hand. This is a call for action. So how are you going to implement research into practice? You have to bridge the gap. Find a problem in your clinical area. For example, when you go to the postings, you see that in a particular ward, patients after admission, they complain of diarrhea, they're complaining of acute gastroenteritis. So you're finding the problem. What causes like this patients when they come to this particular ward? Why do they all get diagnosed with diarrhea? Why are they having this? And you think of a solution. The solution can be as simple as you're just thinking, why can't they wash their hands? Maybe it's because they don't wash their hands properly before eating. And you're going into the literature search. You're gathering information. You go to Google Scholar and you're saying what was done, what are the strategies they followed globally. And you go to your library, you look into the books, you talk to your professors and tutors, and you find a solution that these patients can prevent diarrhea by washing their hands. So you're implementing something like you make a checklist so that just before the lunchtime, you're making sure every patient is washing their hands, and they put a check, and the nurses or the student nurses put a tick mark in their chart. It's very simple, but it will make a massive difference. And also research is not only in clinical side, you can look it among yourselves as well. Like for example, a group of 10 students, when you go to your clinical postings, you see that many of you suffer from urinary tract infection. You're saying like, why is it? Why are we falling sick? And you think of a solution. It's because you people are very busy with your clinical posting and you forget to hydrate yourself. You're not drinking adequate water. So you all come to a conclusion, you gather information, you search the Google Scholars, you search for the strategies used, and you find that we can form a hydration station where you keep a table at the corner in your clinical room, and you keep all your water bottles there, you label it, and you see how much of water you're drinking every day. So you make sure every one of you are drinking 1000 to 1500 milliliters of water, and you're implementing it into practice. You're seeing how massive difference it's going to make a post implementation of this. So this is just the basic examples. You can implement research into practice in a bigger aspect as well, and this will promote the health and well-being of the patients, and it will also improve the economy of the hospitals. So the main takeaway, key message I want to tell you guys are, find the person behind each patient. Each patient is unique. Each patient is a person, because as nurses, when you all graduate, when you work as nurses, and even in the wards, you could have heard people saying that the first bed is not passing urine, the second bed is pressing the buzzer. You would have heard things like that. But it's not the bed number which makes a patient, it's the person. Please find the person behind each patient. I have worked with patients who just come to the hospital because they have no one to talk at home. So it's just, as nurses, the compassion is very important. That is one of the research ethics I would like to mention and highlight as well, because nursing is not just a career, it is a calling. Please, I want to all of you guys to watch this video before I finish. In this video, you can see a massive differences the nurse and the nurse researchers have made in the history. So that is a slide which shows the courage of nurses, the impact a nurse can have in each and every patient. So I believe you as young nurses, as budding nurses, will see the person behind each patient. Whatever be the role you're going to do, please make sure to see the person behind each patient. And let me end up. This is the final session of my slide. So what is C21? As you saw, the video which showed the courage the nurses had towards each patient, the courage to rise up to make a difference. You know, COVID-19 is contagious. But what is more contagious is courage. Let's spread courage. Let's spread positivity. I'm going to offer you all this pill called courage. Be courageous. We will overcome all these challenges together. And as nurses, be like kids, ask questions, be innovative. And that's the end of my session. Thank you very much for listening. Any questions, please? Any questions, please? Hello, sir. Hello, guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Students, do you have any queries? Gokulakrishnan?
All right. So special mentions to Gokulakrishnan, Shalini, and all the students who are very active during the presentation. And well done, everybody. Congratulations. Go ahead in your nursing profession and make the differences. Thank you very much.
And just a second, ma'am. They
Yes,
want
sir.
to mute. I will try.
Can I have some feedback, please? Can you guys tell me something which is one positive and one negative
ma'am,
about
I
my
have a
presentation? Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Today, COVID-19 has been spread all over the world.
Yeah.
What can be the preventive measures that can be done over people who are still roaming around outside, ma'am?
That's a very, very wonderful question, Gokulakrishnan, and I would like to appreciate you. So the measures which can be done is just the massive thing is awareness. Awareness has to be created among all these people who are roaming around, because they don't know COVID-19 is everywhere. It's very unsafe to roam around. The main thing we can do is awareness, and what we can do is you have to live by example. When you question, live by example. When someone you can't change everyone, but you can change yourself. Live by example. Change the people living around you. Propagate the information to your family. In that way the information can be spread. The main thing I would say at this juncture is awareness. Thank you, Gokulakrishnan.
Thank you.
Any other questions, please? All right, can I have a feedback, please? Any one positive and one negative about my presentation? I'm very sorry, guys. This is early morning time for me, so I might be a bit sleepy. I'm very sorry because this is early morning. It's just turning. The sun is just rising up here, so I have to wake up early in the morning to catch up with the Indian time. So, is there any questions, please, or any feedbacks? Can you tell me one positive and one negative about my presentation? Anyone? No feedback?
Ma'am, I have a question, ma'am.
Yes, please. Who's that?
What is a Christy, ma'am?
Yeah, hi, Christy. Yeah.
Ma'am, what is WHO's strategies to the nursing research, ma'am?
WHO strategies, there is no particular strategies you can say from WHO. WHO has strategies for different treatments and conditions, but nursing research, as you said, is a very broad spectrum. You can be in your education and you can be doing a research. What I do here is I work with clinical trials, with new medications, with new devices. So that is a different type of clinical research. As student nurses, you can formulate your own strategies. Like when you can form a group of people amongst yourself and work on a project. It can be as simple like when you go to the community, you see that among 10 children, you see 8 of them have got dental caries. That is raising an alarm. Think, why are these among the 10 kids I'm speaking, 8 of them have got dental caries? Why is that? Is it because they have lack of knowledge about good brushing techniques, or is it because they have lack of knowledge about good eating habits? So you think of a problem, and then you can have formulate your questionnaire. You can just distribute the questionnaires among the children and assess their knowledge, what is happening. Then you can create awareness among themselves. This can be done through role play, or you guys are very amazing in creativity. I can see that from the videos you share in the PSG YouTube channel. So be creative, create awareness. So it's like the strategies, or like you can formulate your own strategies. Christy, thank you very much for that question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else?
Ma'am,
Can I ask a
feedback.
question, ma'am?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Ma'am, will the Covaxin or the Remdesivir will be preventive for every strains of viruses, coronavirus?
No, this is this is a very I can't assure because it's all under research. So variants, every variants come every day. You can find a new variant. Like you can find a Kent variant, you can find an Indian variant, a Brazil variant. So it's all different. So all these variants, it's like it's like common cold. Why do people get common cold? It's because the common cold virus, once the first time you have, the next time it just changes its shape. It's like Dasavadaram Kamal, where he changes his attire and he comes in different attires. It's like that. It comes in different shapes. So coronavirus is like that. These Remdesivir is good in preventing a critical illness, but we can't assure that it will eradicate all the variants in the COVID-19. It's under research, because that is the challenge. When new things come up, your mind thinks of something new and you get into new medication. That's a very good question now. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I have a question, ma'am.
Yes, please.
To those who having minor symptoms of COVID-19, what do you think, staying isolated in home is better, or we can move on to the hospital and take a medical treatment, ma'am? What do you think which is better, ma'am?
As far as I think, considering the current situation in our country, I think if you have mild symptoms, you can stay at home, isolate yourself, you and your family, stay at home. For 14 days, just isolate yourself and stay at home if you got mild symptoms. In that way, you're making a bed free for someone who is critically ill. So if you just have mild symptoms, you can stay at home, unless it's not going to affect your life.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, good questions, guys. I can see your concern. I can see that you people want to make a difference with this COVID-19 as COVID warriors. Any other questions? Any other questions?
Ma'am, feedback from my side.
Yes, please, Gokula Krishnan.
It was a nice and innovative class. We gained enough knowledge, and it was an informative class, and we gained adequate motivation from your guest lecturer. It was an interesting class. Thank you.
Thank you, Gokula Krishnan. Thank you very much. Please keep spreading the positivity, and all of you stay positive as well. I've got a question from Shalini. Could you explain what are the topics can be taken for research related to pediatric? Yes, Shalini. So it depends. Research. We can't suggest a particular topic. It can be anything. I told you about dental caries. It can be a dental caries. It can be with breastfeeding. It can be anything. So when as a research in a research field, you have to be like kids. That's why the end slide has got children in them. Just ask questions. Keep on asking questions. Where, when, how, and why. When you keep asking questions, you will find a solution, and you will find an answer for all your questions. So it's a broad spectrum. Just think in your mind, what has affected you most? It can be like assessing the mental health of children. It can be educating them about menstrual hygiene. Anything. It can be anything. Any other questions?
Thanks, students, for your enthusiastic questions. உங்க share screen மட்டும் stop பண்ணிருங்க.
Yes, sir. Just a moment. Yes, sir. They're really an amazing bunch of students. So I didn't expect a lot of questions and response, because being a Zoom presentation, I know even in normal class, including me, I have felt sleepy. We all sleep. We get bored. But you people are really amazing, and I